Ladies and gentlemen, if anybody's here for the public comment period, you need to sign in on the public comment sign-in sheet. Just wanted to make sure you knew that. So, all right, I want to welcome everybody, and I'll call the meeting to order. I've got 6 o'clock. Okay, the first item of business is Pledge of Allegiance, and we'll ask Vice Mayor Barbara McRae to lead.
Please join me in reciting the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we get too far into all the business tonight, I want to introduce Cody Haven. Cody is in the Master of Public Administration program, and I'm twisting his arm to go someday into municipal government. And so he's been a tremendous help to him. We have put him to work on a number of issues, and he's going to be a good one. Thank you, Cody.
Thank you.
All right, next thing is the adoption of tonight's town council agenda. Does anybody have any changes they want to make on the agenda? Add to, delete? All right, hearing none, I'll introduce a motion to adopt as presented.
I so move.
Second.
All in favor? And the next item is the approval of the consent agenda for October 7th tonight. I'll introduce a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented. Is there a motion?
Well,
yes, go ahead.
I was going to say, set the public hearing for the plat stamp amendment. We need to announce when that is, right? If we approve that.
It's listed, it'd be 6:05.
Next.
At the first.
November, is it the 4th, whatever the first Monday is?
It's the 5th, I think.
Is it the 5th?
I believe it is. Who's got a calendar handy?
November 4th.
Okay, November 4th, okay. Any other questions?
Nope.
Is that it? Okay, all in favor? Okay. All right, the next issue is a public session. Is anyone signed up for the public session? Yes, sir.
You have the...
Oh, here it is. Y'all snuck it in on me. Okay, Ms. Campbell, 184 Meadowbrook Drive. You're up, ma'am. Welcome, glad to have you.
When I moved to Meadowbrook Drive about 15 years ago, it was a very nice place to live. We had no complaints of it, but now there's been people moving into the communities that
Can't hear.
Having a little trouble hearing.
that don't mow their yards.
Can you pull that mic down just a little closer to you? I don't know that it'll do any good, but let's try it and see.
Okay.
Oh, it did. Yes.
I think we need to have a rule about people mowing their yards when it gets to a certain stage. The neighbor should be able to call and have the city send them a notice that if they don't mow their yard, that the city will mow it, and then they charge them a big price for mowing it. And also, I am very upset about dogs being tied up outside on chains, out in the hot sun, and my backyard smells because I put a fence up and they have a dog right on the other side of the fence, and they never clean anything up. And I had the Terminex man over the other day, and he said, I smell in your backyard. And that is awful, and they have children that are playing out there. And there's diseases I know that can be caused by stuff like that. And right now they have cleaned up around it a little bit, but they've had big piles of trash all over their yard ever since they've lived there. And there's 2 more houses on the street. And then where you turn up Wilkie Street to go to my house is a disgrace.
That's at the corner of West Main.
Right.
Okay.
And you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, ma'am. We certainly do. And we're working on it.
Well, I think you should have started working about several years ago.
Yes, ma'am.
It's got cars and it's just filthy looking.
Yeah.
And when you go in to buy a home, you should not have to take less for your home than you paid for it, but that's exactly what I would have to do if I sell mine.
Okay.
And I just think this town has really gone downhill in the last few years, and something needs to be done about it. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate that very much. Okay. Mr. Ledford, you have signed up, sir. You know we have a 5-minute limit.
Okay, I'll make it fast. I just want to touch briefly on a couple things. I hate to disagree, but wanted to congratulate the town on what a wonderful job it had done. So recently, the new bridge is beautiful. The sidewalks that are going on in are amazing. The roundabouts, the traffic has just been flowing. And I just see a lot of good things happening for Franklin right now, and I just wanted to come and thank the board and congratulate them for that. Touching back on the sidewalks, I do like to walk and run and bike around town, and I would just encourage the town, at any chance they get to invest in more sidewalks, please do it. I know that they're sporadic and it may seem like it's here and there and doesn't lead to anywhere, but from a runner or a walker's perspective, that's like an oasis in the desert, and we know that eventually we'll get connected, so I would just like to encourage the town to make any advancements that they could in the sidewalks and continue to do that, and congratulate you on all the work, the tireless work that you're doing that so often goes unappreciated, but I want to say thank you so much, and thanks for letting me take your time. Bye.
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate it, sir. Okay, new business. Presentation on growing outdoor communities. Corey, are you here?
Doesn't seem to be here.
I don't see him. Okay. Well, we'll just hold that,
Go next month.
and see. Okay. Discussion on Love Street property. Ms. Hanley, you're up.
Ready or not?
Welcome. Pardon?
It feels strange to be on this side. Hi, as you most know, I'm Joyce Hamley. We've had a situation come up on our street that they have evidently rented to two men who are now making it into a halfway house. Probably a lot of the concern in the neighborhood would have been a lot better if somebody would have approached the neighborhood, given us some heads up what's happening, what the rules, regulations. To this date, none of the neighbors except me has been talked to. Nobody knows for sure what's going to happen, how it's going to go, anything. I can attest to, we've lived in that house for 42 years, for over 20. The people who have owned that house have done nothing to take care of that house. I am very concerned for the people who are going to be going in there. My understanding, there's going to be at least 6 people, 6 men, and a supervisor and a wife or something. That's 8 people in a very small 1.5 bath house. There are trees overhanging. There is no backyard. It has not ever been cut in the last 10 years. They have no place to walk, go out. The front yard is minute. There has been no gutters on that house for well over 15 years. When and if it ever rains again, the rain level seriously is 2 to 3 inches surrounding most from the side all the way to the back is covered in water and puddle for days. Mold, I have been told by the people, thank God that we had for 4 years that kept the house halfway decent, that the roof still leaks, that there is mold, that there's a terrible odor in the back bedroom that they can smell when it is hot, that there are limbs laying on the wires that go to the box, to the circuit box outside, that they're just laying. All these things have been addressed and told to the landlords, and not one thing has been done for it. The people living there had a hole in their bathroom floor for well over 3 to 4 months that they could look at the dirt. And I understand the floor has now been repaired. But this is the kind of response. Is this the response that these people who are trying to get their lives back together are going to live under? I am very concerned with this thing. It would be nice if people would approach us, kind of tell us, I'm understanding there's a curfew. Is curfew at 6 o'clock? Does that mean they can't come out? Or will they be walking on the street? They have been told that they may not smoke a cigarette on this property, that they have to walk down the street and up the hill to smoke. This means they're passing a dead-end road going down our street, standing by our mailboxes, which they shouldn't be doing. We don't know who they are or what. we do not have any clue who they are or what they're doing. It just gives us, we've had nothing but drugs and violence in those houses for at least 15 years, and the neighbors, to say, are unsettled because of the conditions they've had to put up with. They finally thought they were having their home safe, and now they're not sure for sure what is going on. I just would like somebody, be it the health department, that they should have to meet an inspection, that house should have to be looked at before they can put people in there and feel safe. That's about all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Doris. Was there anyone else, William, Ms. Hanley?
Pardon me?
Was there anyone else that wanted to
No,
speak to this issue?
I'm going to do it all.
Okay. Okay. Madam Manager will look into this.
We certainly can. I know the attorney, Mr. Henning, myself, and our town planner, Mr. Setzer, we've been informed of it. We'll be glad to look into it. Thank you for making us aware. We appreciate that, Ms. Hanley.
Good to see
Can I
you.
ask a question?
Certainly you may.
Are these houses licensed?
There are certain group home activities depending on whether you're providing some kind of care that you are required under state law to be licensed. From what I understand and from Justin's discussion with them, they are not planning on providing any medical care, counseling type care or anything like that that would fall under a licensure requirement. So there are, depending on what you're doing, what you hold yourself out as, they don't appear to fall under some kind of category like that. As your UDO is currently drafted, I don't know that necessarily, I think we do actually, Justin, remind me, we have treatment for where, in the UDO, where a facility like that would have to go and it wouldn't be a residential use.
Not one that's of that, like a halfway house. We don't have one listed, but we have ones for like adult daycare facilities, but not for like a medical rehab facility of any kind.
Mr. Henn, I also had a question. I wanted to know, are these people having to pay them? Are they paying rent for this? Does that now become some sort of commercial if they're paying?
No, I mean, there's lots and lots of residential rentals that are all over R1 and R2, you know.
And they have to show the income, and they have to have records and financial, that they're not going to be taken advantage of?
Well, I don't.
I'm just unsure whether these people have ever done this before.
Right.
Is this their first home that they're ever doing? Have they had training? You know, some of the neighbors are talking about a class action suit. This is how upset, because a lot of information was not given to the neighborhood.
Well, and I, you know, that's part of where, I think that Justin was right when he told you, and I haven't looked at the restrictions on your property, but there may well be a civil suit that you could consider taking on that wouldn't be something the town can take on your behalf, but something that you as property owners may have certain rights in the deed restrictions and so forth.
Thank you.
That you could look into. I think that, so there are certain types of facilities like these that you cannot zone out of a residential area. Those of you who had been here long enough ago to remember when we did rezoning for the hospice house, may recall that we ran into, it's a family care facility that if it's people that are being, up to 6 people can live in and receive a kind of treatment. And not to get too far in the weeds in it, sometime in the late 80s, they tried to zone out housing like that because of AIDS homes is what it came down to. People didn't want them in their neighborhood. So there was a statute passed that said that's a residential use you have to allow there. I think you could, by ordinance, and this is something you could look into for future uses. I mean, this use may already be in process, and you could only make it non-conforming by a later change in your zoning. But you could say, and I think the way this is tackled in some places is to say no more than 5 people, unrelated people living in one residential unit are allowed, something along those lines, and that's potentially anyway. But we don't have anything in the UDO right now that makes that a a disallowed use where this property is. So it's zoned for what they're doing, is I guess what I'm saying.
I've researched this quite a bit before this. Sober living homes are not, you do not have to be licensed or registered in the state of North Carolina. I don't see how, if there's no licensing requirements for this, that even under a UDO thing that you would be able to do that. If I wanted to open an Oxford house somewhere, which is that I can just rent a house and I can open one, and they are all over the state, and I personally, I don't know anything about this house, so I'm not trying to say this is okay. But I think this is a sign of things in the recovery community that are going to happen in towns. They're happening everywhere else, and it's going to happen here in some neighborhood, and we're just now kind of getting a taste of it. That's not to say I'm advocating this house, but I think it walks a very fine line about saying, I just don't see how the board can say you can't do that.
There's nothing in the minimum housing code.
Yeah,
I mean, I know
unless
that
it
is-
went something from that angle,
Yeah.
not as a,
There is in terms of living space, and Justin evaluated it for that, and they in fact had to adjust their plans a little bit to stay in conformity with, which they are doing, we're told.
So they are in conformity with
Yes.
the minimum housing? Okay.
Okay. Any further discussion? I guess, Ms. Hanley, what we'll do is we'll keep an eye on things, see where it's going, make sure it meets
And you will
minimum
be informed
housing.
of anything and anything that we
I think
No.
probably this is something we need our fire chief to take a look to,
I think a fire chief would be a wonderful idea.
and make sure that all safety regulations are followed. I do know that they don't have to have a sprinkler system because of the number of people there, but I stay in touch with us. We'll be looking at it.
Thank you.
Pardon?
What would you have us do, Joyce?
I don't know. I guess we are more upset. What would I have you do? I don't know if you all can do it. I would like the house inspected for the safety of those people.
That'd be the minimum, that's the minimum housing approach.
Yeah, whatever for the safety, the codes. I just know how bad that house has been. Every one of the tenants that have been in and out of there have talked, because I'm next door. I've heard of all the conditions they've continued to live in some cases simply because they did not have the money to move. You know, they had to stay where they were because they couldn't afford to go elsewhere. But it has not been kept up, and I just don't know safety-wise.
But is that the issue in the neighborhood, or is it the quality of the people who are staying there?
Well, both. I'm sure it is both. We have not, and I don't know enough about it. I know that they're probably all have some kind of felony. That's fine. Is there sex offenders? We have a lot of small children in our neighborhood.
If they're sex
That's another
offenders-
big concern that nobody
Well, sex-
has told or come forward to tell us what or who or what are the conditions. It's a lot of unknown instead of somebody just simply kind of maybe giving us a little heads up whether we liked it or not. We would have still gotten some information.
Right.
Chief Breedlove, could you and the fire marshal, I think y'all could go in and make an inspection. Can you? The fire marshal and the chief working together?
Do we know who's in charge of operating this? I've got very little details in
I have-
the side of it. I would be glad to try to gain consent to do that, and
Yeah.
organize that with the fire marshal's office, and
Yeah.
see if we can make some ground.
Would you request that if, okay, anybody else on this particular issue right now? If not, we'll move on to discussion on waiving tap fees for Macon County's new dog park. Madam Manager, you want to bring us up to date on this?
Yes, Mr. Mayor and Council, what you have before you tonight, it's in your agenda packet. It's from the county manager's office. They're requesting that the town waive the water and sewer fees associated with the construction of the new dog park. What you have before you tonight is the total. It's for $4,680. The town's cost would be the $792.62. That would be what we'd request that the county pay, is the $792.62.
Okay, any discussion from the board?
I come from an era that, my God, you could get shot down in a minute. We would never waive a fee like this from Macon County. Absolutely not. That's not the era I want to stay in. I want to understand that a lot of us are them too, so it's cutting both ways. We're also county. And there's a lot of ways we can work together. This is going to give us another bathroom in town and all of that. And I just personally would like to see us turn the page on this, but I can tell the younger ones in the group that there was a time where this would not have even probably made the agenda. But I'm glad it did, and I fully support it.
You'll make a motion to
I'll
that
make a
effect?
motion to that effect.
Second it.
In a second. All right, any further discussion?
Let me just make sure it's clear, it's to waive the fees, but.
Get our
ask
costs.
For costs to be paid.
Yeah, get what it costs us.
Okay.
So that's of $792.
Yes.
Okay. All in favor? Okay.
Thank you, Joe, for framing that as such. That was good.
Historical perspective.
Oh, yeah, man. That was a no-no.
Okay, discussion on WR contract for Phase 2 of the water treatment plant. Madam Manager.
Okay, Mr. Mayor and Council, what you have before you tonight is actually two separate requests. Let's take the first one, actually just passed out, just received it. As most of the council and mayors are aware, we started this endeavor with Phase 1 of the water treatment plant approximately 5-6 years ago. During that time, we did a rate study that looked at what the town would need to set our rates at for the next 5 years to be able to incorporate the debt from the water treatment plant along with any other projects for the town's future growth, such as water and sewer lines. It's now approaching that time frame to where it's going to be crucial for us for upcoming budgeting purposes and to forecast in the future for the next 5-10 years to look at doing another water study. What you have before you is tonight from Withers. It's a proposal from Withers Ravenel. It's W.R. Martin. Martin did our original proposal, so they're able to mimic some of our existing data and forecast for the next 10 years. I do think from a management standpoint, this piece of this puzzle is going to be crucial for us to be able to look and see what our water and sewer rates will need to be in order to start planning for Phase 2 of the water treatment plant. Because the second part of this equation is the contract that you have in your agenda packet that looks at Phase 2 of the water treatment plant. I know that we have versed your committee members, Ms. Mashburn and Mr. Culpepper, that we have received some figures with Phase 2. We had originally anticipated around the $4 million mark, and that was 5.5 years ago. You're now looking at around $8 million. So this second part of this equation would be to allow W.R. Martin and Withers Ravenel, if the town desires, to move forward with starting to secure funding. Now, this, keep in mind, if you do agree to the second part of this contract, that's not locking you guys in, stating that you are moving forward with Phase 2. That's simply granting this firm permission, along with myself in finance and public works, to move forward with trying to secure these funds. That's not committing, saying once we receive these funds, that still has to come back before the board. The overall push to get this part done is you would get in your spring grant cycle. You might have some grant funding. Odds are it's going to be SRF loan funding, which is what Phase 1 was. And that cycle starts in April. And after discussing this with the consultants, you would probably need to have all paperwork submitted by January in order to be considered for the April funding cycle. Now keep in mind, even starting this, if we started tomorrow, ground running, you're still looking at probably another, before you even actually started Phase 2 construction, at least 3 to 5 years out from there. This is just starting to lay the groundwork to get us there. And that's where we was kind of wanting some guidance from the mayor and council tonight, here are two crucial parts of this equation of where do we want to move forward as a town.
While we're at that, something I've been concerned about for a number of years, could we work into that study the feasibility of also having a secondary water source at the confluence, possibly between the Little Tennessee and Cartuga J Creek? Not Cartuga J, I'm sorry, the Little Tennessee and Colasaja, I'm sorry.
And that's something we are looking at and we could continue to do with this study.
I think the major issue that's going to be facing municipalities across the state for years is going to be water supply. If we don't have a good water supply, we have no town whatsoever. I mean, all you got to do is look at Flint and some other towns and the situation they've had. So I was just wanting to mention that from the board.
That's sticker shock. It says 8 million.
Yeah.
It'll be 10 million by the time we get
It could
around
be.
to starting to dig, and then
Yeah.
putting all of our eggs in Cartuga J Creek, to me, is not necessarily our wisest move. It may turn out to be after the engineers study it more, but if we've got some time, I'd like to see what our options are. That's for sure. And we do have time.
You do have time. With phase one was crucial that we move forward and have that done for your pre-treatment operation of it. So we have finished phase one. This would just complete your phase two. But again, like you alluded to, Mr. Collins, I mean, it's a couple steps out. The main thing that I would recommend to the council tonight is to at least get your rate study going. To start that, to look at what kind of debt, whether you look at in 2 or 3 months or 2 and 3 years, whenever the council decides to move forward with this, whatever that final number is going to be for the second phase of the water plant, we need to know what your rate structure is going to look like to be able to accommodate that cost.
You mentioned grants. Is there a possibility of outright grants?
That's what would be in your April. There's a little bit, there's not a lot, but that's what this firm and corporation would look at in your April funding cycle as well, as what would be available.
Grants are dying up nationally right now. Community development block grants are going by the wayside. Appalachian Regional Commission funds, where we used to get almost unlimited money, that's gone. Okay, anybody else? Okay, do we need a motion on that?
We
To
would
proceed.
prefer a motion at least for the 17.5 to take out of retained earnings to go ahead and start your rate study, because that's going to take several months.
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
confused. I'm confused, Selma. We're gonna have to find a way to get more water, period. And right now, the only thing on the table is getting some more out of Cartuga J Creek, and they're saying it's $8 million. I'm a little bit unsure why we need a rate study right now, because we're gonna have to, whatever it costs, we're gonna have to have it, and if we buy it, we're gonna have to pay for it. I mean, would
And
the
that's the will of the board.
what benefit right now would the rate study give us?
It would at least show you if you want to continue on this path with the Cartuga J Creek, which that is what some of the studies we've looked at currently, and we've dug up some old studies do show that. The only thing the rate study would help you do is really for budgetary purposes and let you see as a council what phase two, how that would impact your residential customers.
So we would know whether to go forward,
Yes.
or whether we could.
But they're going to base the rate study off of the $8 million price tag?
As of right now, that's the figures we have to work with. And they have assured us on multiple meetings that this is what they are comfortable with, these prices at this time.
But I think they would project your debt service capacity, period.
Yes.
So you would know whether you are putting all your eggs in one basket or you got more eggs than you thought you did. Or, yeah.
Could be.
Okay, does anybody want to make a motion or further discussion?
Yeah, I move that we go ahead with the rate study.
Okay, is that a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Okay. All right, update on the leash law, Madam Manager and Mr. Henning.
Turn that over to you, Mr. Annie.
It's obviously been a topic of discussion in the last several meetings about an incident or two involving dogs that were allowed to run loose. We have been studying the particulars of that problem and the problem in general about animal control. I have been anxious to remind you all that you, both the times this topic's come up, that you have taken a step of participating with the county in its animal control ordinance, and that you do, by policy and by invitation of the county, invite their enforcement of the countywide animal control ordinance. And it should be designed to take care of situations with animals that are dangerous when they're found to be dangerous and what happens to dispose of them. Having said that, we have looked at what options are available to you to take further action. The first, and I think most obvious of which is, and this is in front of you, and I realize you're just now receiving this today, a draft ordinance that would remove some unfortunate language in your current ordinances. Chapter 91, section 91.01 currently says no horse, goat, cattle, or other animals except dogs shall be permitted to run at large. So you have not made an expression one way or another whether you're, and this is not a leash law per se, but it is a prohibition on permitting animals to run at large. The other thing that I've changed here, so my first suggestion to you is you need to remove that exception for dogs running at large. I don't think, that's from the 1976 version of the code, and I think pretty obviously needs to change. Also, this would make clear that what the penalty is for having let an animal run at large, and for whatever enforcement value it's got, it would be there, and it directs your law enforcement, your police officers, to cite folks that are found to have allowed animals to run at large, if you can find them. It's not, again, not necessarily a leash law, and it's not an animal control ordinance, because that would be a duplication of what you already have in place with what the county has to enforce. I wish I could tell you that there's an ordinance you could adopt that will make sure that no animal ever runs at large ever again. All you can do is prohibit it and penalize it, and so you could consider more enforcement methods if you wanted to. You could decide you want your own animal control ordinance at the town level, but that would mean more staff members probably, unless you're just going to task your police force with also being an animal control officer. It would mean a pound. It would mean processes to decide what happens when animals are caught because of that ordinance. So my suggestion to you is, I feel like, and you are in a position without any further hearing, if you are ready to do it tonight, you can adopt this ordinance that removes that exception for dogs, and it says that we're no longer under ordinance allowed to run at large in the town.
Okay.
Can I ask something?
Great.
Please.
A couple of things. It says caught. Does that mean actually caught, or just observed, or found to be?
Well, the original language was all animals caught running at large. So I don't know if sometime back in the day there was that the town had some independent mechanism, like a dog catcher, so to speak.
I mean, caught could have another meaning. Like, I caught you doing it. That doesn't mean I actually captured
Sure.
you.
I'm troubled, if we adopt it and say accept dogs, then we've effectively made it illegal for a dog to run at large. Are we gonna say we're gonna vote that law in and then not enforce it? And if we're gonna enforce it, who's gonna enforce it? And then what are we gonna do when we catch the dog? We're right back. Are we not right into that?
You are, except in the sense that at the moment, with the situation, as I understand it, unfolded over at Wilkie Street, in that circumstance, you'd have the additional enforcement of a town civil penalty for having violated a town ordinance. But other than that, the county's ordinance is what you have by policy invited to be adopted within and enforced within town limits. So I think the question of who's supposed to catch the animals and what they're supposed to do to process with them has been answered in the town. It's that you follow the county ordinance and have asked the county to enforce it within town limits.
Mr. Brady, you have a question?
Could we say found to be or something other than caught? I mean, because then if somebody's animal is bothering everybody, but you wouldn't actually have to capture it to say that they were
Sure.
violating this law.
Yeah.
And the other question I have is, what about cats? Is it illegal to let a cat run loose? They don't bother anybody usually, but.
It was included it is included in your current ordinance theoretically. You can't, I mean, it says no horse, goat, cattle, or other animals except dogs. So I think a cat theoretically is not.
No, that's funny.
I'm wondering if we're basing all this on, I will be the first to tell you that what happened on the dog bite that brought all this to light probably might not happen again in 100 years. That was a strange set of circumstances of which nobody had any control over. Maybe we might go back to, John, I don't know when we ever did away with it, but you used to have to come to the clerk, the town clerk, and pay $1 for every dog you had. I don't know if any of y'all remember that or not, but way back, you had to, and so there was a handle sort of on who had dogs. I don't know. This was a very unfortunate situation. There had not been, most of the calls, Chief Adams, I think that y'all got were barking dogs, not really biting dogs, until this situation happened.
Correct.
This may be a bit of a stupid question, but what do you actually classify running at large on an animal?
I think that was what Ms. McRae was.
I mean, if it's if my dog's in my yard and it's running around, but it doesn't go out in the street and bite somebody, is that running at large, or is it have to get off my property? I don't really.
That's a good question, and I can't tell you sitting right here what a precise legal definition of at-large is. It's what's in your current ordinance. I mean, I could find out.
Because, I mean, I think everybody is concerned if you're walking down the road and or on the sidewalk and a dog bites you. So I was just a little confused about where
Could
it
we just
actually.
define that, untethered and off of owner's property or something to that effect?
You know, I noticed in Silva, whenever I had looked at it, I think it was Silva that said contained on your property. It actually phrased it in some way to that your property line, something. But,
I mean, I have questions like, if we believe there's a problem, is our town, are we gonna have to be in charge of picking that dog up? Or is the county going to come in and pick that dog up? And if that dog has to be kept for whatever reason, are we gonna have to have our own separate pound? Or can we use the same one that the county has now? I think if we're gonna want to go down this road, I think we gotta find out how much we can weave in the infrastructure that's already in place, rather than figure out.
And I totally agree with that. I just point out that I struck out, so this would strike out some current language that you have that's a little confusing on the point of who's going to do the impounding and who's going to, because again, currently you have adopted a resolution that asks the county to enforce their ordinance within the town limits.
Right.
Existing language is a little bit confusing on that point. This would add a civil fine for somebody who violated that, the prohibition on allowing animals to run at large.
Yes, ma'am.
And Mr. Mayor, Council, if I may, this came from the Ordinance Review Committee meeting today. We had taken it on with the task of looking at the leash law and all the questions that are being asked tonight. We took all that into consideration, because you do have to look at the cost about, if you're going to have your own pound, or you're going to, if you've got to board the dog. And so this was just something that Mr. Henning and some staff had found that some already existing language to clean up. But we did look at the leash law, and at this time, I mean, there's a lot of unanswered questions, and it's something for the board to really consider before moving forward. And it's something that'll probably take, a little bit of time and work if that's something that the council wants to direct staff for us to do. This was just kind of one thing I know Mr. Henning had found that might clean some of it up, and it may not. So.
And you don't have to do it tonight. I mean, I'm not telling you need to do it now.
The thing is, this is the language, you've just struck out what's there. I mean, I read it, and I mean, so really, if we adopted this, we are at least helping for the time being.
Yes.
And if this doesn't work, we've always got the other options. We're not adding anything, we're just taking out that
Correct.
it said except dogs could run around.
I'm sorry.
But you could still research and see how it goes. I mean, that's what I'm thinking. It may not be the final answer, but it would certainly help in the interim.
I know another thing that you have to think about. There's no child around this town that you don't see sometimes walking around town with their dog.
Without a leash.
Not on a leash, that's correct, yeah.
Well, I guess it would be complaint driven more.
Well, it could be complaint driven, and one problem that we had in this particular incident that brought this about was that the animal shelter was full. And the animal was given back to the owner. And nobody realized the owner was in jail. So it was a cascading effect of weird stuff that happened from there on out. And so I just throw that out because that's what transpired.
If there's a mean bag dog right now in town, who is the point of contact for a person to call? Are they supposed to call our police department right now? Are they supposed to call county animal control? Does this inject us in between the person reporting and the actual entity that is supposed to take care of it?
Chief, if I'm not mistaken, I think that we answer a call with animal control.
If it goes in, yeah, we'll assist animal control.
Yeah.
Call may go into dispatch, they'll
Right.
call animal control and us, and the police department as well.
And if the chief if the call is to your department first, don't you, and it involves animal
Yeah, we call
control
animal
issues, you
control, and they
call
meet,
animal control.
and they always meet us there, so it's never been an issue.
I don't think that this would change that.
I don't either.
It doesn't put us as the responsible party that we're supposed to take the dog off the premise.
No.
It still falls under the county ordinance that.
Right. In fact, I'm trying to remove the language in there that makes it sound like you might be the ones that are supposed to take it.
That's good.
Yeah.
We're just not set up for it. If we wanted to be one day, that's a different conversation, but as of right now, we have no ability to take care of
Right.
a bad dog.
Correct.
This just gives us a tool, a civil penalty.
And this is just the normal, like, civil penalty that applies to every other, okay.
$25 for the first one, and it's progressive. Yeah, same one that you use for almost every.
I thought so, just want to make sure.
So they would have to write a citation for the animal running at large.
Correct. I think it would just look like a, citation for violation of town ordinances that they do a
Right.
lot anyway, but it would specify for that purpose. And I could get back to you whether you adopt this tonight or not, with some more definitive answers about caught versus and at large, and how to maybe give better treatment to that than this language. And again,
Well, I know that's the normal thing, but I was just sitting here thinking, what's an animal at large?
Or you may have somebody just remove the dog collars and see a dog, and how they can get a citation then?
Yeah, you don't know whose it is.
Well,
I mean, if we're not set up to catch the dog and figure that out.
sure. And again, it specifically in the situation that sparked all of this discussion, the thing it would have added, if it has any kind of, enforcement value at all, is a civil penalty that your law enforcement officers who were involved in it could have assessed against the owner of the dog.
Who was in jail?
Who was in jail.
He was in jail, that's right. Well, I kind of get the consensus that the board's not ready to take any action on this tonight.
And that's fine.
Yeah.
So is that consensus pretty much that? Yes, ma'am.
I would be okay to make a motion to pass this tonight in the interim time of you doing further research to maybe clean it up, because
agree.
it's not gonna hurt anybody that we're trying to do something.
And I would second that.
I think that I have gotten the feeling, I have not had one person come up to me and say, don't do a leash law. I mean, they came and been reporting incidents where somebody's been bitten, and I think they're really starting to want us to do something, and this would be a step that we're trying to do something. That's where I was getting.
Let me open another concern here a little bit about, are we talking about a leash law or are we talking about a containment law?
It's more like containment. It doesn't
Yeah,
say
then
anything
le-
about having to keep an animal on a leash.
I'm not so sure the public will understand that we're talking about keeping your dog up, not when you come to picking on the square, having it on a leash. I mean, talking about a dog being on a chain, as this lady was a little earlier,
Well, that's another
is that a
issue.
containment?
Well, the thing about keeping dogs tethered at all times, that's another thing you can consider whether you want to allow to happen or not. And it's a separate issue. It's not, that certainly would pass as being containment of the animal.
It's inhumane.
And that's, there are cities have banned that. That's one of the things that I think Justin, in looking at leash law, has found. I think City of Cary recently did that. I don't know how widespread that is, but that's something we could look at and let you know how, what that would look like too. If you're,
Did you put that in the form of a motion?
I did,
Sorry, yeah.
but as
Brandon
we
seconded.
go on about that too, I also remember in another, it's outside of the motion, where I remember reading where another town that it was in your view, like if I were sitting here and my dog was right with me, that didn't constitute that it was running at large, sort of. And that might be more of a picking thing, because people have their dogs there with them. But I would think that it might need to be clarified a little clearer in the future, but I did put that in the form of a motion for a.
And Brandon seconded.
So
Brandon,
has there been a second?
Brandon did.
All right, I mean.
To adopt this as presented, no
As
word changes.
presented, while we
in the
do
interim.
further.
This wouldn't break the bank if we adopted it tonight. I realize that it next to nothing that was already there. I'm troubled by seeing something that has just come out of committee this
Today,
morning.
yeah.
We haven't really looked at it. We don't know what it means. We're saying right here, we don't know what it means. And this is a situation that was brought on by an oddity. It really was. I'm not sure it's the best practice for us just to vote yes on it. On the other hand, it is so lukewarm that if we choose to do so, it's not changing the course of the river. But I don't like to handle changes to our ordinance this quickly. I just don't think it's a good.
I think you're absolutely right, but I think this is safe enough, like you said, lukewarm.
Because it's just
That-
struck through some things.
that it's not
was the only
gonna-
reason.
It ain't, you're right. It ain't
Damage
changing a
anything
lot.
if we do it in the meantime, so to speak.
I don't think this hurts either. I just don't know if it helps us enough to where we're muddying the waters of actually who's responsible for picking up nuisance dogs. And that's not us. We're self-admittedly not even close to being able to handle that type of job. I mean, we don't have a pound, we don't have a dog catcher. So again, I don't think this is gonna hurt anything for us to pass this if we wanted to, but I think we need to convey the idea that as a town, we're ill-prepared to deal with a nuisance dog. That's why we've adopted the Macon County dog ordinance or whatever it's called. And Those are the
Yeah.
parameters, and that's the ordinance that we as townspeople, or also county people, we pay for that service. We need to rely pretty heavily on that ordinance and look to that, where there are dog catchers, there is a kennel, there's a system in place. For now, if we wanted to go down the road of doing a leash law, that would entail much more than just passing an ordinance that says you have to keep your dog contained. It would require money and staff and facilities. The money and staff and facilities are already there, they're on a county level. I think we should lean on that ordinance which we've adopted, the county ordinance.
And I don't think passage of this changes the fact that you did.
I'll tell you, if we can stay out of the animal control business, because it is very specialized, a lot of training, they have to go through the series of having rabies shots, catch equipment, vehicles with cages on it. As long as we can rely on the county, I think we're much, much better off in animal control. So, where we stand, you want to go ahead with your motion?
Go ahead.
A vote? All right, you want to restate it, so we all? I hate to do that to you, but.
I would make a motion that we adopt this ordinance tonight and continue to maybe clean it up and seek out some other more permanent options, but this in the interim.
And I would second it.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, 5-1. Mr. Culpepper opposed. Okay, settles that one. Update on opportunity zones. Ms. McRae?
Yeah. Probably everyone read a few months ago that there was this new thing called opportunity zones, or maybe it was a year ago, it's in the past somewhere. And nobody really knew what they were, but Franklin is one. And so I've learned a little bit about it through the EDC, Economic Development Commission. And there's a deadline here, so I thought it might be good to just let people know what this is. I've had people ask me, a lot of people thought it was going to be a grant process, so there would be money that would be available to people, and that doesn't seem to be the case. This 371139700301, that is the census tract in Macon County that has been named an opportunity zone. Let's see if I can get this thing to, what do I click? Oh. What did I do? Okay. All right, this is a new program. It was part of the Tax Cuts and Job Act, and that was a bipartisan effort by Senators Cory Booker and Tim Scott. The idea was to redistribute wealth. The way this works is that people who have large capital gains can shelter that money by putting it into a special fund called a Qualified Opportunity Fund, and that fund then is used to provide capital to projects in undercapitalized communities or low wealth communities. And so it's a program that really benefits, it's supposed to benefit everybody, the wealthier people who have the money to and that they're trying to shelter, and the poorer communities that need that money to do a project. And this isn't really all that important, but you see how it was just passed in 2 years ago, 2017. And it's taken a long time for the IRS to get all the guidelines out so people could understand what this is all about. And Forbes magazine said this: by and large, investors have been excited about opportunity zones but slow to engage without clearer IRS guidance. The way it looks, projects that are already in existence are more likely to get funding just because of the peculiarities of this program. Everyone gains, I said, so those who have money to invest can defer capital gains tax until 2047 or until the asset is disposed of. This basis step up means in 5 years, your basis in that money is increased by 10%. That means you don't have to pay tax on that 10%, so that saves you quite a bit. And if you leave it in there for 7 years, then your original basis is increased by 15%. Then any money you make in the fund is tax exempt. So there's a lot of benefit for those people who have money to invest. But the community benefits, especially communities that are low wealth communities where people have had a hard time getting capital to do a project. So this gives them access possibly to these funds. This money can be invested anywhere in an opportunity zone. And so it could be invested in a wealthy neighborhood or it could be invested in a poor neighborhood. And there's been some criticism of the program because initially the big projects that were available happened to be in wealthy parts of the census tract. And so the money went there, and it didn't look like that was the meaning or the purpose of the law. But you could argue that by building a big hotel, say, in a nice part of town, you're providing more jobs for the whole community, and that would benefit everybody. And there's a trickle-down theory, of economics. So, but anyway, that's the way it is. But each state was authorized to establish these zones. They could have zones representing only 25% of the low-income census tracts. So, I told you it was complicated. The U.S. Treasury Department certified these zones, and in North Carolina, the governor picked the zones, and every county got at least one. The state ended up with 1,000 census tracts that met the criteria, but they were allowed 25% of those 252 opportunity zones in the state of North Carolina. And the one we got in Macon County happens to be most of Franklin. These are the kinds of projects that qualify, and I understand that mostly now the money has been going to real estate projects, but you could do any kind of a project with it. So it could be commercial industrial real estate, it could be housing, it could be infrastructure, it could be an existing business or a startup business. Some sin businesses are excluded by the law. I don't know what those would be. And for real estate projects to qualify, the investment has to result in substantial improvements to the property. So this is the state of North Carolina. If y'all can see, the green spots are where the opportunity zones are. And you see Macon County has that little area there. Tommy Jenkins submitted several tracts for consideration, and the only one we got was this one in Franklin. And you see, the reason some of them are so large is because those eastern counties, they have a low population. And so the census tracts were probably pretty big. So here we are. This is this census tract. And I don't think I'm not going to remember that number. That's the number. It goes from Highway 23 on the south to the Little Tennessee River on the north. That's Sanderstown Road. From Porter Street, Harrison Avenue to Highway 28 on the west, and then all the way to Highway 23 on the east. Is that clear to everybody, the map shows? So it's very large. So, for example, it would include Angel Medical Center, the old hospital building. And it would include Main Street. So there's some opportunities for us there, and I want everyone to know about this, and because if people have to come up with projects, you have to have a project to get the money. The sooner the better, because the way that the law right now is written, you get that 7-year benefit. You have to get that 7-year benefit, the 15% increase in your basis, which would decrease your taxes that much. It has to be invested in a qualifying fund by the end of 2019. That doesn't give anybody very much time. I suspect they're going to amend that, but there's no certainty of that happening. But you still get the 10%, which is not a bad savings. So if anyone is interested in developing something in Macon County, I mean, look at look at the census tract and see what possibly could happen there. If you're an investor, so anybody can invest in a qualified opportunity fund and help Franklin improve, or you could invest in a fund anywhere in the country. There are quite a few of them that have already been set up. Most of them have been set up by large investment banks or investment companies, and they are looking to make a lot of money. And so they are looking for those big projects in the best part of town kind of thing. But you can set up one. Franklin could set up a qualified opportunity fund and to do a project here. You could do one for one project, you could do one for several projects. So if some investors wanted to get together and create such a fund to help Franklin grow, that's a possibility. And any project in the opportunity zone qualifies. Any project. Those zones are set in stone. They're not going to be changed. They've been certified. They are where they are. So, anyway, I just wanted everyone to know this. This is a possibility. So, some of these financial packages are so complicated, and I did not take finance in college. This is out of my realm, but I've been talking to people and trying to understand how this works. But here's some needs that I see that could be helped with this kind of money, and that housing, especially the missing middle, workforce housing, we really have a great need for that. Infrastructure is a possibility. Downtown commercial space, I mentioned that. Health opportunities such as a gym, broadband to the door, entertainment venues, gathering places, anything like that. So I mentioned the downtown historic districts. There's been talk about improving the upper floors and creating apartments there or commercial space. That could be done. That could be a project. The Angel Hospital campus that is going to be no longer in use and nobody knows what to do with it. That is in the opportunity zone. So that's, maybe something could be worked out there. The Whitmire property is in the opportunity zone. The Niquosi area, the River Gateway District is all in the opportunity zone. So it's, that's all I just wanted to let you all know that this exists and what it is. It is not a grant. It's not like you can get free money. This is a loan, so to speak. You would borrow money from this fund and you would pay it back. And it may not be the only type of funding you get for a very large project. There's lots of ways to fund a project. One is a private partner, public-private partnership. Then we have this situation where a developer might want to do something in this area and start looking at qualified opportunity fund investors for that. There are innumerable people who have hung up their shingles saying they're experts in this field, and you probably would need an expert if you were going to get it done. But anyway, that's it.
I happen to be working with another client who is working with a developer trying to take a piece of property to develop in an opportunity zone. And I think it's been really interesting to watch everybody try to get their heads wrapped around the idea that it's almost like incentivized housing, and this is a housing development that, what we're used to is trying to subsidize housing for folks that maybe couldn't get up into that level. This is not that, because of it's tax advantaged, but to provide, and it is a missing middle type project, it provides just good housing for middle income folks that you don't, necessarily have a whole lot of people trying to create market for it, so I could see a project like that being a fit here.
Well, we brought up affordable housing and setting up a housing authority, and there didn't seem to be any interest.
But this is not
I know it.
Right.
But this was one of the things. Affordable housing is the biggest problem we've got as far as housing is concerned. We've got a lot of rich houses, we've got a lot of poor houses. We don't have the affordable houses.
Yeah. And we have very little
Yeah,
long-term rental.
and affordable housing doesn't necessarily mean low income, but it's those type of people Ms. McRae is talking about that would be moving in here to work in the medical field, the data field, the software, this type of thing, so.
You know,
Go ahead.
This money can apply to a project that's already underway too.
Right.
So I don't know if there is anything like that happening in this census tract, but here's a possibility for some funding if it is.
I wish we'd go back to grants.
I know.
That was the best incentive we've ever had, was grants. Okay, any further questions? If not, Counselor, I think you have a discussion on the town of Franklin guardrail.
Yes,
Policy.
Mr. Mayor. So in your packet, there's a draft policy. I had started to have this be an ordinance, but rethought whether you don't need an ordinance to say whether or not you're going to install guardrails or any other kind of traffic safety devices. I think that's, for one, needs to be left to the flexibility of your staff to determine when, within budgeted funds, and when they're not, they're obviously going to come to you for that. You also you want the flexibility to be able to address places that need to have traffic safety addressed sooner rather than later. So rather than have, and several months ago you had this issue suddenly be sort of thrust upon council to determine whether or not to put in a guardrail, this would shift the determination of that and within funding that you have to your staff. So that's the purpose of this policy. What I've also tried to do here is begin to, it's a goal of mine to very quickly begin to knit your policies together. If you have ordinances, they are, instruments of law. We do a really good job to keep them straight. We keep them online. Policies have been a lot harder to get arms around, and they're much more day-to-day sort of operation. I want to, and I hope you will give some thought to how you want to see policies adopted, how many things you want to have come, what subjects you want to have come to the council first, or the subjects that your town manager could adopt straight away. So that's just food for thought for later. For now, this policy and the effective part of it is this section 3 that just says, will determine when guardrails are advisable under state DOT regulation and install them when they're within budgeted funds, so you all don't get surprised by the request for that kind of thing. Happy to answer any questions about it, but if it's acceptable to you, a motion to adopt it be in order.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor? Okay. All right, Council, I think that we have a update on the sidewalk agreement.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. As we discussed earlier in the ordinance review group, our last discussion about this topic, again, this is the sidewalk that would go from the end of what your current corporate limit is down to the Tractor Supply building. As I've been telling you, I didn't think you had legal ability to do that unless you have annexed in the property, because it's got to be, for you to maintain a sidewalk, it's got to be within your corporate limits. And we talked about how it would be possible, but very difficult to iron out where property lines were and try to figure out what you could annex in. After that discussion, Nathaniel, your town engineer, had a really great insight that right now, with the widening project that DOT is getting ready to do through that whole corridor, they are going to be in the process over the next year or so of determining where boundaries are and where there are properties that go to the center of the road. They're going to acquire easement. And I understand they don't do that by just easement anymore. They're going to acquire fee title to the property. So that whole swath, and probably wide enough easily to fit in this sidewalk project, is going to be, the state is going to go to the trouble of marking it out, surveying it, and acquiring it. Which, if you wanted to, what you could do is then annex in the state right-of-way on 441 down to where this project was going to end. And then, Nathaniel had contacted DOT to see if they thought they would have any objection to that. And as I would have suspected, and I think we talked about the fact that parts of this you would have taken in annexation that are DOT, they don't care, they don't pay any taxes on it, it's really, they still maintain the road itself, it's really nothing to them whether or not a highway is annexed in. So the upshot of this is there are other wrinkles to it and things that, as our discussion earlier today sort of elucidated, we might want to think about in terms of emergency response. And there's nothing you can do right now, we think over the next year or so is where they are going to be in that process of acquiring the right-of-way. But I think long-term, and something to discuss amongst yourselves and ask questions and think about where you want to head with this, once they have that whole corridor titled to DOT, you could annex it and then enter into, with DOT, this agreement about provision of a sidewalk at a substantial savings to what it would cost you to do otherwise. I also think there would be some ancillary benefit of having a town corporate limit that goes down through there in terms of attraction for growth along 441 through there in a more controlled fashion than you're able to do since you don't have annexation authority anymore unless it's voluntary, basically. So and I know that's a mouthful, but I'm happy to answer any questions about it. It's something to begin to think about and plan toward for the next year or so.
So this would essentially be a voluntary annexation?
Yes. I think what we could do, it would be a voluntary annexation. I think we would do the legwork, so to speak, for that. I mean, most of the legwork's done once the thing's surveyed. It's a petition I've got a form, I can do it in a minute to put in front of you. We'd ask DOT to sign off on it, but I don't think there would be any heartburn on their side about doing it.
Okay.
We're not forcing anybody to become part of the town.
Correct.
They would just have the option later on to voluntarily annex if they wanted to.
Yeah, which they do now, but like we were talking about earlier, have done in, it's satellite annexes that are just here and there, down through there, which, we did, again, like we talked about earlier, get a local act passed that made it a little easier for satellites to come in, but it's not real ordered growth as you might like it to be.
It's disjointed.
Yeah.
So everything would be contiguous to town then?
Yes. Yeah, all of this would take in basically maybe all but one of the satellites that are down that way, and they become contiguous since they touch a border that goes all the way to town.
And the only property we'd be annexing would be owned by the DOT.
Correct.
That's pretty awesome. Good job, Nathaniel. That's cool.
And do you need direction from us, consensus, or?
I don't really think so now. I mean, and we discussed earlier whether we could take this contract, sort of betterments contract you have here, and see if DOT would be okay with adapting changes to it to say, this is the plan. We know you're going to think about annexing this right-of-way corridor once we have it all. And once we do, we'll pay this $36,000 toward the sidewalk project. I don't think they don't need us to commit because they're going to continue their process anyway. We really can't commit to build the sidewalk until you can annex it, which that's a step in a year or so. So I don't think the time's quite right. I mean,
We want to let them know that we're in support of the idea, though.
Yeah, and if it's the consensus of the council, we'll continue to let them know, and we'll continue to build toward it.
That's great.
Yeah, that's great. That's
Yeah.
really cool.
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to thank Nathaniel for coming up with, for finding what we've been searching
Yeah.
for.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Which all of our great minds didn't.
No guardrail authorities on this board whatsoever. Thank you, Nathaniel. Okay, moving on. Let's just go around the table before I get into the announcements. Why not? Okay, Brandon?
No, sir, thank you.
Ms. McCray?
Just fine.
I'm good.
Hunky dory.
All right. Couple of announcements. Movie night will be Friday, October the 18th. It will not be that horror movie.
I like Hocus Pocus.
That's the only child's movie I've ever been to, and I couldn't sleep the rest of the night. Pumpkin Fest, Saturday, October the 19th. We're probably going to need a lot of volunteers for that. Second annual Town of Franklin leaf pickup is available. Call the town office. From what I understand, Mr. Moore, isn't it that you want the leaves in a pile where they can come and...
Yes, if we could get them just as close to the side of the road as we can, and you do not have to put them in bags, we will take care of that.
Okay, and that's a one-shot deal. Everybody gets one free leaf pickup.
Yes.
Okay, the only other thing I have is I want to really do a shout out to the town employees. We have gotten so many compliments on the decorations that have been put out, the pumpkins, and I just don't think we can say enough good about our town employees. I believe everybody pitched in on that, and it was just wonderful. All right, no further business. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
He's in.
Okay. Raise your hand, don't you?
They're sleeping.
Require your school children to
Yes, I
raise it?
do.
Okay. All right. All in favor? Okay. Good meeting, folks.
I want to know who drew the square.